Okay. Good evening, everyone. And tonight we are going to continue our prophet series, and we're going to be looking at dedications of prophets. In other words, how it's kind of a little bit of how it's structured, what kind of elements we're expecting to see when a prophet kind of gets his dedication, and how it manifests differently for different prophets. So what we're going to be doing is we're first going to be looking at Moshe, right? And because that's kind of this archetype in certain ways, right? There are certain things that I really do think you need to read the Moshe stuff first to understand why it's got to appear in all the different prophets, right? Not all the different prophets, but our big book prophets. But we're going to do that relatively quickly. And then we're going to move on to Ishayahu, Isaiah, Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, and Yechezkel, Ezekiel. So we're going to look at how it plays out for each of those three prophets. Those are the ones that we have the major dedications for. Our shorter prophetic books, we don't have the same kind of, this is when they were chosen, this is how they were chosen, this is the revelation in which they were chosen. We don't have any of that stuff, and understandably so, because they're short books and we want to get right to the prophecy. They do, for example, Amos in particular, they do have certain things that they say about what the job of the prophet is, but not within a kind of a dedication scenario. Okay, so we're going to dive right in, and we're going to start with by looking at Shemot, Exodus, and Moshe as kind of an archetype. This one we're going to move through kind of more quickly because I want to get to kind of the book prophets and have time for them. Okay. Before I start, are there any questions? Okay, great. Here we go. All right. Everyone sees my screen, which is Shemot, right? Okay, great. So this is where Moshe. Now Moshe's we've seen him as a baby, and we've kind of followed his different adventures before this point. But this is the point where he becomes a prophet. Okay, and what we're going to see is there's certain elements that have to happen, and certain elements that don't. One of the things that has to happen is there has to be some kind of revelation. That's obvious, right? God has to appear to the prophet in some way. Okay, so how does God appear to the prophet? To Moshe, he appears through a burning bush, right? Moshe does it, and Moshe in this case, he does not seem to be particularly frightened. God's like, don't come closer, right? Take your shoes off, right? And then God has to introduce himself, right? Now, certain things are specific to Moshe because of the place in the narrative, right? In the narrative, the idea is that Moshe is part of a people that's kind of lost. They're enslaved. They're far from the God of their forefathers, etc. So God has to kind of introduce himself, right? And then he has to explain. I heard everyone crying out, and then he says to Moshe, "This is going to be your mission." And this is an important part, as we'll see in dedications of prophets. What is your mission, and what will the response be? Which is interesting because you would understand why this would have to include their mission, but what the expected response is, which is no one's going to listen to you, right? Is unusual. Now, Moshe is going to be listened to by Israel for a change, right? For the people of Israel are going to listen to Moshe, but Pharaoh won't, right? At least not initially. And this is explained to him. So let's go into that. So God says to him, "Vata hine tzakat bnei Yisrael ba'a elai." And now the cry of the children of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the tremendous torment, essentially, that Egypt is tormenting them, right? Or pressuring them, but really torment. This is Moshe's job. He's going to go, and God is sending him to Paro, and he's going to take out my nation from Egypt. Okay, and here we have Moshe's refusal, right? He says, Moshe says, who am I? Who am I to do this? Now, Moshe is unusual. We're not going to see as many objections with any other prophet. Other prophets have one objection and then they calm down. Moshe doesn't stop. He objects the whole way through until God gets angry. Okay, there are certain things that are saying about Moshe, because there's a point here that Moshe did not want to lead the people, or he didn't, it wasn't a job that Moshe wanted. Moshe didn't want this job, A, and B, he's not supposed to be charismatic, right? Because that's one of his objections. He's not a charismatic leader and he didn't want to be a leader. This was forced on him, right? And that kind of defines Moshe's whole attitude, where he's trying really hard to be a leader and it's a very crummy job, right? But he is the leader of Israel. And I think one of the things it's emphasizing here is you shouldn't think that he did it for his own benefit, and you shouldn't think that he was able to lead people just because he was charismatic, because he wasn't. He was able to lead people because he was chosen by God, okay? So you have a lot of these refusals with Moshe's story, all right? So Moshe says, okay, let's say I go to, and so he says, who am I? So God's like, I'll be with you, don't worry. Okay. And Moshe says to, and again, I'm doing this quickly, I'm not explaining every word here. So Moshe says, okay, let's say I go to Bnei Israel, they're going to be like, who is this God? So God says, this is what you say. You say, hey, yeah, sent me to you, right? That's what's going to do. And then you say, this is what you're going to say. The Lord God of your forefathers, God of Abraham, God of Yitzchak, God of Yaakov, sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my remembrance through the generations. And you should go and gather the elders, and you should tell them, I've noticed you, I've remembered you, and what's being done to you in Egypt. Okay, and I'm going to bring you out to the land, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And they're going to listen to you, right? This is an important part of prophet dedication. What's the reaction going to be? So Israel, they're going to listen to you. The elders of Israel are going to listen to you, all right? But the Egyptians won't, right? Pharaoh won't. He's not gonna let you go. The king of Egypt won't let you go. I'm telling you right now, I'm gonna have to smite them, right? After that, he's gonna send you, all right? And I'm gonna make the Egyptians like the Israelites, and they're gonna give them stuff. Okay. So then we have, and Moshe's like, but they're not going to believe me. So God gives him signs to do, and then Moshe follows up with, so he's already said, who am I? What God? What, they're not going to believe me in terms of the God. What God should I say sent me? They won't believe me. And now he says, Vayomer Moshe, I'm just going to read the whole verse. Vayomer Moshe el Adonai, bi Adonai, lo ish dvarim anochi gam mitzmol, gam mishalsham, gam me'az dabercha el avdecha, ki chvad peh uchvad lashon anochi. And Moshe says to God, he's like, please, I'm not a good speaker. I've never been a good speaker. I'm still not a good speaker because I'm heavy of mouth and heavy of tongue. And what that seems to mean, so like, oh, he's a stutterer. It seems like more than that. It seems like he's just not a good speaker. Like he's not a charismatic speaker. People aren't going to listen to me. So God's like, yeah, who's in charge of that, right? Vayomer Adonai elav mi sampeh ladam o mi yasum ilem o cheresh o pikech o iver halo anochi Adonai. Says, I, God, am the one who decides whether someone can speak. Okay, so I'm going to be with you. I'm going to be with your mouth. I'm going to tell you what to say. And then he says, look, could you send someone, send someone else, send whoever you can send. And at that point, God gets angry and he's like, you got a brother? Great. Your brother's going to help. Okay. All right. And that's it. Right. And then Moshe goes and he meets Aaron on the way, and the two of them go to Pharaoh. So this is what we have. We have the setup with Moshe is he keeps on refusing the mission until God gets angry. But we have a revelation. We have a reaction from the chosen prophet that's like, wait a second, I don't think so. And then the mission is spelled out together with what the reaction is going to be. Okay, and these are all elements we see in, well, except for the refusal, which we don't see throughout, and we'll see what that says about different prophets. Essentially, we don't see it with Yechezkel. With Ezekiel, we don't really see the refusal. And it says something about different prophets, the way these elements, and especially the kind of picking up on Moshe and his mouth, right? That it's a theme. It's it's almost a trope, the prophet's mouth and what has to be done with the prophet's mouth for him to speak. And it really seems to be drawing from this thing with Moshe and changing it differently according to the prophet and the prophet's character and what we're supposed to understand about the prophet and his mission. Okay? I'm going to pause briefly in case anyone has any questions about this. We're going to move very quickly now to our main book prophets that we want to talk about. Questions? Okay.
No, I just want to, it's not a question.
Yeah.
I just want to know, when it says in Chumash, we use the word kaved peh. In the Yiddish translation, the word is shtamler. So my name actually appears in Russia's commentary on this pasuk, just so you should know.
Oh, nice. Cool. A good point. So let's...
Stammer means stutterer?
Yeah, I think it's the same word as stammerer in English. It's just a Germanic version of the same word.
Nice. So now we're going on to the dedication of Isaiah, Yeshayahu. Of course, we're talking about what many call first Isaiah as opposed to second Isaiah. Second Isaiah does not have a dedication. Why? Why does second Isaiah not have a dedication as a prophet?
Because it's meant to be the same as the first Isaiah.
It doesn't exist, right? We're not supposed to notice a second Isaiah, right? The whole point is that it's Isaiah, right? So you don't have another dedication. So you can't, the whole point of having second Isaiah at the end of Isaiah is that there's no other prophet, it's Isaiah, okay? So that's the glory of using a well-known prophet, right? Who's already well-known. Okay. So here we have Isaiah. Like again, I personally read second Isaiah as a separate prophet for sure, but you're kind of not supposed to, right? Like the whole point is that it's just added to Isaiah, right? Okay, so here is Yeshayahu. Now, famously, of course, his dedication comes 6 chapters in, right? Or rather 5 chapters in, it's the 6th chapter. The previous 5 chapters, many interpret the previous 5 chapters as kind of like a good summary of the prophecy, which is why it's there. In other words, here are 5 chapters that kind of summarize the ideas of Isaiah's prophecies, and that's why we have them in the beginning, and then we have the dedication, okay? So here we have the beginning of Isaiah's role, Yeshayahu's role as a prophet, okay? And it starts b'shnat mot hamelech Uziyahu. So Uziyahu, he dies in 733. However, Uziyahu hasn't been ruling for quite a while. So this is actually during the reign of Ahaz, who reigned after Yotam, they both reigned during the lifetime of Uzziah. So Uzziah, it gives us a year, which is 733, but the actual ruling king at this point is Ahaz, okay? So in the year that Uzziyahu died, and I saw God sitting on, well, really my master, right? Because it's not the name of God, it's actually my master. So you said the word, my master, sitting on a lifted up throne, Vishulav mle'im et ha'echal, and the edges, his garments, the sleeves kind of of his garments, I think his train is actually not a bad translation, filled the whole temple, okay? Now, I want to say something here. So frequently when we're talking about, this is, you call this Maseh Merkava, the description of the divine chariot. This isn't really, right? That we get in Yechezkel and Ezekiel, right? You get that in Yechezkel. What we have here is a very, very short description of the divine presence in the heavens, as it were, with angels with angels praising God. Okay. And then we move on really quickly. Okay. You just have to kind of fill in your imagination. When we get to Yechezkel, there's actual really concrete description of exactly what the divine chariot looks like. Now, we're not getting into it in this class because we just don't have the time. I covered it when I taught Yechezkel, Ezekiel, in about 50 classes, if I remember correctly, a few years ago. 50. It was a lot of class. It could be 50 classes, maybe not, but it was a lot of classes. It could have been 50 classes because we did it a whole year. We didn't take off a lot. We probably went over a year with it. No, maybe not because it's not that many chapters. Sorry about that. But we did a lot on Yechezkel, and we did it at that time. But Yechezkel, when Yechezkel talks about the divine chariot and divine revelation, he really speaks in much more concrete terms. All right. And that's very Yechezkel. He's very concrete. Yeshayahu here is talking, just says very briefly, he describes the angels. The angels are standing, right? Opposite, above opposite, let's say. Six wings. Actually, no. Yeah, 6 wings for each one. 2 to cover its face, 2 to cover its feet, and 2 to fly. Okay, so it's got, because they don't have clothes, right? So they're covering themselves with the wings, and they have an extra 2 to fly. And they call to each other and say, Kadosh, 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 Hashem Tzvaot, Maloch Kol Haaretz Kevodo, right? They say to each other, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, filling all the land with his glory, right? And then the door moved. In other words, everything shook from the tremendous noise and what they were from them saying that, and the house filled with smoke. And I said, Omar, okay, and this is the prophet speaking. Omar, oili ki nidmeti ki ish tmei sfatayim anochi ubetoch am tmei sfatayim anochi yoshev ki et hamelech Adonai tzvaot ru'u einai. So what does he say here? He says, oh no, I am dead. Like I'm gone. I'm destroyed because I am a man of impure mouth. And you see of impure lips. And what he's doing is you've got a kind of a flipping a little bit of Moshe saying, I'm kvad peh kvad lashon, right? I have a heavy. What is he? He's impure of lips, but not because the prophet himself is bad. His whole generation sucks. Right? His whole generation, and among a nation of impure mouths, of impure lips, I'm sitting, right? I'm living in among people who are impure of mouth. And I am one of them. So I'm also impure. Okay. And now I saw God with my eyes. And of course, this comes back to the idea that if you see God, you die, right? There's this idea, if I see God, I'm going to die. And that's what he's saying. I saw God and I'm going to die. Why? Because I'm impure. I'm not worthy, right? Am I not worthy just because of me? Because I'm terrible? No, my whole generation's terrible. Everyone's terrible. Okay. So what happens? One of the angels flies to him, right? So he takes one of the angels, flies to him, and he's got a coal, right? Where did he get the coal? He took it with tongs from the heavenly altar. He takes his coal from the heavenly altar, vayaga al pi, and he touched my mouth with it. Vayomer hinena gaze al svatecha v'sar avonecha v'chatatcha techupar. He said, behold, this touched your lips, and your sin is gone, and your sin has been what's the word we always use? What? Atoned. Yeah, but this is the thing. So what is it? It's a physical purification. He took something that you are now physically purified. You're purified. We took an act. We did an act that purifies you. The same way we purify the temple for Yom Kippur, right? And purify the nation. We purified you now. We purify your lips by touching you with a coal from the heavenly altar. Okay. And then at that point, Yeshayahu is ready. In other words, his big problem was saying, my lips are impure. The angels purified his lips. So now when he hears God saying, Omer, et mi eshlach, God says, who should I send? Who will go for us? Va'omar hineni shlacheni. And I said, here I am, send me. So there's very little hesitation here on the part of Yeshayahu after he gets over the problem of his impure lips. Vayomer, lech v'amar l'am hazeh, shim'u shemo v'al tavinu. Okay, now he gets the mission. So we had the revelation, we had kind of a hesitation. Now he's going to get the mission from God, what the mission is going to be. What is his mission? Okay. So he says, go and say to the nation, Shim'u shamoa v'al tavinu, u're'u ra'o v'al teda'u. You'll surely hear and you will not understand, and you will surely see and you will not know. Okay. Hashmen lev aham azev v'osnav hachbed ba'enav hasha. Why is this nation not going to understand or know? Okay, again, we already have the reaction. How are the prophet's words going to be received? This is already part of the mission. This is already described. The nation's heart is going to be fattened, right? So it can't accept anything. V'osnav hachbed ve'enav hasha. And their ears are going to be stopped up, I guess, and their eyes closed, right? And it reads like this is the command, but you can't really read it as the command. It's got to be the reason they're not going to listen to you is because this is their state. They're shut off. They're just not going to go la la la. They're not going to listen to you, right? Pen yer ebeinav uvaznav yishma. This is a very harsh statement. Lest they see with their eyes, it says he sees, but it really means like the nation. The nation sees with their eyes and listen with their ears, and their heart understands, and they return, they repent, and are cured. In other words, God's like, I don't want them to understand. I don't want them to be cured yet. I don't want them to repent yet. So they're going to be all stopped up. You're going to speak to them, and they're not going to get you. V'omar ad matai. I'll just read the whole thing. V'omar ad matai Adonai. V'yomer ad asher imsha'u arim me'en yoshev uvatim me'en adam v'adama tisha'esh yishmama. So I said, till when, my Lord, right? And he said, until the cities are destroyed without any inhabitant, and the houses don't have people, and the land is a waste, is left waste. V'richak Adonai et hadam v'rabah hazuva b'kerev haaretz. And God, the Lord, right, will distance the people, and there will be a great amount of abandoned places in the land. Okay. It's terrible. Assyria, and if there's even like a tenth of what there was, it's going to be eaten up. So it's like the. What's going to happen is they're going to be destroyed, and then they're going to have to grow back from the holy seed. In other words, I'm going to lay waste, and then they're going to have to regrow from what's left, right? And then it goes right into a different prophecy. So just to give you kind of historical context, what's going on here? Yeshayahu is the prophet of the Assyrian invasion. Right. When does Yeshayahu function? He functions during the invasion of Assyria. Now, I've said this more than once, right? We always think of Assyria as only attacking the northern kingdom because they're exiled in 722, right? The northern kingdom is exiled by Assyria in 722, and this is more or less, this is pretty much when Yeshayahu is prophesying. Just to give you, so Uzziah dies in 733. The Assyrian exile is in 722. Okay, so it's 11 years later. All right, so this is the prophecies about what happens in Judea with the Assyrians invading, because the Assyrians do not stop at the northern kingdom, because Jerusalem's also rebelling. They destroy the entire countryside, right? They conquer Lachish, which is a huge deal. They destroy everything around Jerusalem, right? Yes, you do.
Sorry to interrupt. I think it's not exact. I think what happened was that the Assyrians conquered Israel on 722. They two stuff. The beginning was 732 with Tiglath-Pileser. There was again in Shalmaneser 722. And the destruction of Judea was later with Sancheriv on 701 BC. 20 years later.
Okay. I think that they were already invading when they conquered the northern kingdom. It could be that Jerusalem was in siege at that time. Like it could be that Jerusalem was in siege later, but Miriam? I think that they, sorry.
As far as I recall, at the time that Mamlechet Israel was being conquered, Jerusalem and Judea they were paying tribute to Ashur. They were paying them protection money to keep themselves safe for the time being.
Okay, so this is let me say some. Let me get the years. Let me get the years. Hold on just a second. Okay, from 745 to 727. Right? Tiglath-Pileser III conquers the Levant. Okay. So that's Tiglath-Pileser just conquering the whole area. Right? Now in 732, Assyria actually helps Judah. Right? In 722, Assyria is the conquest of the north. Dun dun dun. Right. And the Assyrian invasion of Judah, you're right, starts in it's 705 to 701, because what happens is it's really 701. You're right, because what happens is the Assyrians come to Judah's aid, then Judah's a vassal state, and then they rebel. You're right, they rebel, and then there's the invasion. Then there's the invasion of Judah, and what happens is thank you. So what happens is. The entire land is laid waste. Judah is essentially captured, like it's essentially conquered, except Jerusalem stands firm, and they are essentially either bribed to leave and that's enough, or they just can't deal with the siege anymore. They've got other things that they need to handle, and so they take the bribe and leave. Okay, because obviously biblically there's a miracle. Right? If you don't want to say there was a miracle, right, that saves Jerusalem, then you say, okay, the Assyrians say we trapped the king of Jerusalem like a bird in a cage, but they don't conquer Jerusalem. They don't lay waste to Jerusalem. They leave him alone, right? They actually go. Now we know that they go. That they say we took all this stuff. We got booty. But they don't actually conquer Jerusalem. And the question is, so why did they leave it alone? Why didn't they conquer Jerusalem and take the booty? Because he was rebelling, right? And it's very possible that it did seem pretty miraculous for them leaving, because they shouldn't have left. The Assyrians were not nice. They weren't a nice nation when you rebelled. And what should have happened was there should have been a really brutal punishment. There was not in Jerusalem. Other places, yes. Jerusalem, no. Right? So probably what happened is that they needed the army elsewhere. They couldn't afford to keep on with the siege, and they took the bribes and went, right? And that must have seemed pretty miraculous. As I've said more than once, this sets up the expectation in Jerusalem that Jerusalem can't be destroyed, right? This sets up that expectation that Jerusalem, that this sets up the expectation that Jerusalem, no matter what, can't be destroyed because God lives there. It particularly sets up the expectation during this period because Assyria lays waste to the rest of the Judean countries. And that's what Yeshayahu is talking about here. What is this tremendous destruction that's going to happen without stopping, with people not listening, where nothing's going to be left in all these places. When does that happen in Judea? It happens. We just don't hear about it much. We know about it from archaeology. We know about it from the Syrian portrayal of Lachish, right? Which Micha mentions Lachish, but we would never think that it was this big deal, right? If we didn't have the Assyrian reliefs of Lachish, we wouldn't think it's a big deal at all. It's just another place.
We also know about it indirectly from the prophecies of Micha, who experienced it because he was living in
Right. Micha mentions Lachish. And Micha talks about this tremendous destruction, and Micha says Jerusalem's going to get it. Micha's like, and Jerusalem's going to fall, right? Because that's what it looks like. It looks like Jerusalem's doomed, but Jerusalem isn't doomed. Jerusalem's fine in relative terms, certainly. Just a second. Jerusalem's fine. And because Jerusalem's fine, that sets up the expectation that messes Yirmiyahu up so much later, right? It messes because that's something that Yirmiyahu has to keep arguing against, this idea that Jerusalem can't fall, right? Okay, I see a bunch of comments in chat and some questions. Yeah, I mean, if his lips were cauterized, doesn't that mean that they would be put together? So Susan said that he said that his lips were cauterized, but wouldn't that mean that they'd be stuck like this? I think so. So Robin asked, are seraphim snakes in this image in Isaiah? No, I don't think so. I think they're angels. I think they're angels. I think they're the angels with the wings. Yes.
Regarding the seraphim, it says in Bamidbar, "Vayishlach b'em et hanechashim hasrafim." Like you can see that seraphs are some kind of snakes, according to Bamidbar, at least. I can find the exact.
I understand. I'm not sure. I'll look into it more to see if there's not. I'll look into it more to see in terms of what's the likely meaning here. In this case, if it's more a snake-like thing. Cheryl has a question. She's been waiting very patiently. Yes, Cheryl? I lost her. Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Oh, the question is, what's the utter destruction that you're taught? What did they do to the land, the Assyrians?
Oh, they could lay waste. I mean, they certainly, in terms of the towns, whether or not they had a kind of salting the earth policy, which they sometimes could, they would sometimes do that, particularly outside of a town that was under siege that wasn't giving up, right? And once they would conquer it, they would sometimes do kind of a salting the earth sort of activity. But certainly in terms of the actual cities, so if you look at the reliefs of Lachish, right, you can see them just kind of taking all the captives away. That they shut down the city, right? The city's gone. They're taking everyone as captive, the women, the children, everyone's going with them, right? They killed some people, they flayed them, so it's a bad scene, right? When the Assyrians conquer your city, if you haven't surrendered, right? If you have, you're taking a chance, right? Certainly if you haven't surrendered, they are not happy. They are not happy, and they will take, and they'll, look, if you look at the Assyrian, the Assyrian reliefs of Lachish, you see that they're taking a lot of people captive, right? They're captives, but they're alive, right? They're alive, they're healthy. And then there are other people who seem to be flayed, right? There's also some guys that they're holding like this, kind of like horizontally, and they seem to be have died not too happily. So that's a way, like, especially when he's talking about there are going to be a lot of abandoned places, right? That's what you get, right? You get they took the city, they took everyone else's captive. No one's going back to rebuild the city because there's no one around, right? And then all the fields around it also don't have anyone to work with them, because that's usually how the city would work. You'd have a walled city, and they would have fields around it, and then at night they'd go back to the walled city, right? So you have, it's just devastating, right? It's devastating. So you have Micha's listing places, right? That are going to fall or that have fallen. And you can kind of imagine what that would have been like. And that's what Yeshayahu consistently describes, right? Is kind of the whole land laid waste, and only Jerusalem is standing, right, like a hut in the middle of the field, right? So like only Jerusalem is still standing. How do
you unsalt a field?
Oh, that's a whole other thing. Like that, they did much more. It was much more like just burning orchards and stuff like that. So it wasn't. So I don't think they really salted fields. I think that they more destroyed stuff. And if you've got an orchard, and it's not easy to grow an orchard in this part of the world, particularly in this part of the world where we're outside of the Fertile Crescent, right? It's not easy to grow an orchard. It takes years. And they would destroy that and look, ha, 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 your work is gone. One of the things that they could do, and I've discussed this in a previous class, is that while they were putting you under siege, you would watch them destroy the orchards outside of your city, right? As a kind of, first of all, to kind of break your spirit and make you, and also create internal pressure in the city to surrender, because the people who own the orchards are like, oh my God, they're burning all the orchards, or they're cutting down rather than burning, I think. I think there are some cases where they burn them, but let's say cutting down the orchards, be like, oh my God, they're cutting down the orchards. Can we stop this, right? We're gonna lose anyway, right? So there are reasons for them to cut down the orchard, but also as punishment, right? So it's, it just crappy all around. Like this is not something that you want to happen. And that's the whole point. The whole point is they want to say, you don't want this to happen, right? Right? So that the people in the Philistines in Ashdod are watching what's happening in Judea, and they're like, oh, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't rebel. By the way, it didn't work. The Ashdodian also rebelled, but actually, maybe that was just under Babylonia. They do rebel. Ashdodian do rebel. That's the idea. The idea is that other cities and other nations look at that and like, oh, we better pay our vassal taxes, even though they're crazy high, because it's just not worth it. I don't know of them destroying irrigation canals. I don't think that they were going to put in a tremendous amount of time and effort into destroying things. They would do the easiest way to destroy things. Their purpose was less to make it so that no one could ever use the land ever, more as a punishment and in connection to sieges, as far as I know. Okay. It's enough to take away a lot of people, and then you have an abandoned countryside. Anyway, so let's go on where time is running out, and we have lots more prophets to get to. So now we will jump forward in time to Yirmiyahu. Okay, so here we go. Okay, Yirmiyahu. So here we start as we would expect from the beginning of the book. Okay, now, oh wait, do you see you see me, the Yirmiyahu in front of you? Is that what you see? Okay, good. All right, now, so here, I'm gonna try and speed up because we're really running out of time very, very quickly. So Yirmiyahu has a different sort of experience. Now I want to say, so what was Yeshayahu's experience? Yeshayahu's experience is he has a divine revelation. He literally sees the heavens essentially open up. He says, oh my God, I'm going to die because not only did I see God, I'm also impure of mouth. Again, clearly drawing from this Moshe thing, but changing it. And as soon as he's purified, he's ready to go, right? And God, he volunteers and God makes him a prophet. Now, Yirmiyahu is different. Yirmiyahu, and he's told people aren't going to listen to him because God doesn't want them to listen to him until they get their complete punishment. Right, which is, it's very harsh, and it's like it's not even clear that it's a punishment. Like it's just there's going to be total devastation, and only then are they going to listen to you. Okay, so Yirmiyahu, okay, he's of the we learn more about Yirmiyahu. He's the son of Hilkiyahu. He's among the priests of Anatot in the land of Binyamin. Okay, now this is in the time of Yoshiyahu in his 13th year, so that would be Yoshiyahu is 640 to 609, so this is 27. Okay, Yirmiyahu operates essentially from 627 to 582. So we have an exact year for when this begins. And it says, until he continues until Jerusalem is exiled. And he says, okay, the word of God was to me saying, "B'terem atzarcha b'beten yidaticha u'b'terem tetzeh merechem hikdashticha navi lagoyim netaticha." This is much more kind of extreme than we've heard about anyone else. Before you were even in your mother's womb, essentially, I knew you. Before you left the womb, I chose you essentially as a prophet. I have made you a prophet to the nations. Okay. And then again, drawing from the whole Moshe not speaking thing in another way, right? Va'omar, aha Adonai Elohim, hine lo yadati daber ki na'ar anochi, right? I don't know how to speak because I'm young, right? Again, taking the Moshe trope, the whole thing, I can't speak, right? As opposed to just being physically in the mouth. This one is, I can't speak. Why? Not because it's a problem with, I'm young, right? So, and Vayomer Adonai Elai al tomar nar anochi ki al kol asher eshlachacha telech vet kol asher atzavcha tedaber. And he said, don't say I'm a young man, I'm young, because you are going to go wherever I send you, and anything I command you, you're going to speak, right? There's no excuse. Once I've chosen you as a prophet from like your mother's womb, there's no, oh, I'm young, right? And then, now again, remember how we said that the mission includes what's going to happen when you speak the prophecy. And here we're going to see just how threatened Yirmiyahu is, right? In his career as a prophet. Right? We didn't see it with Yeshayahu. With Yeshayahu, it's just they're not going to listen to you. With Yirmiyahu, they're going to attack you. Okay, so let's see. Al tiram mipneihem. Don't be scared of them. Kitcha ani latzilecha, Num Hashem, because I am there to save you. Vayishlach Hashem et yado vayaga al pi vayomer Hashem elai hinei natati dvarai beficha. So how did he say now you can speak? He touched his mouth. And he said, here, my words are in your mouth, okay? And this is very, it's fun for me to see how the way these things kind of play out are very typical for that prophet. So Yirmiyahu is all about certain symbolic actions where God educates him. God educates Yirmiyahu by doing kind of symbolic actions with him. This is a really good intro to that. God touches his mouth. It's like, my words are in your mouth. Yechezkel, who is super concrete, does something super concrete, which we're going to get to, right? Which also with the mouth, right? This is kind of, I touched your mouth, and now my words are in your mouth. Okay. I have now appointed you over nations and kingdoms, and we only see this in one section of Yirmiyahu. We do have prophecies against nations, to uproot and to destroy and to build and to plant. And then we have this kind of education with symbolic things. God says, what do you see, Yirmiyahu? He says, I see an almond branch, shaked. It's a pun, right? You see a shaked, and I am shoked. I am determined I am absolutely resolute in acting on my word, right? I'm not, Vayidvar Hashem Elai Shenid. He says, now, second, he says, what do you see? I see a pot that's boiling with its face towards the north. Okay. And he says, and God explains to him, from the north is where the bad is going to come for all the people of the land. Of course, Bavel is in the north. Also, Jerusalem happens to be more vulnerable in the north, where it has fewer natural barriers to entry. And And then God explains, God says, I'm calling all the families of the kingdoms of the north, and they're going to come, and each one is going to put their chair or their throne at the entrance to the gates of Jerusalem and around all its walls and all the cities of Judah. They're all going to come and try and conquer Jerusalem. ודיברתי משפטי אותם על כל רעתם אשר עזבוני ויקטרו לאלוהים אחרים וישתחוו למעשה ידיהם. Why is this going to happen? This is something we didn't see so much with Yeshayahu and his dedication. Why is this going to happen to Jerusalem? I told them my laws and about all the evil that they did, that they left me and they sacrificed to other gods and they bowed down to the work of their hands. Vata, and now we're going back to how they're going to accept Yirmiyahu, namely they won't. Vata tazor matnecha v'kamta v'dibart alehem et kol asher anochi atzavecha al techat mipnehem pen achitcha lifnehem. So you gird your loins, get up, speak to them, everything that I command you. Don't be afraid of them, lest I make you afraid of them, right? Lest I make you afraid before them. ואני הנה נתתיך היום לעיר מבצר ולעמוד ברזל ולחומות נחושת על כל הארץ. He says, I'm going to make you a fortified city and a bronze pillar and is that right? No, an iron pillar and copper bronze walls on the whole land. Remember when I told you about how Yirmiyahu speaks to power groups within Jerusalem? So this is a typical to the kings of Yehuda, to its officers, to its priests, and to the nation of the land, right? So in other words, these are different groups. I am going to make you're going to be like a fort that why is it important that he's like that he's got bronze walls and he's a fortified city? Because they're going to attack him. Okay, they're going to fight against you, but they won't be able to conquer you. Because I am with you, says God, to save you. In other words, they are going to be physically attacking you. All right, and in fact, we see that with Yirmiyahu. Yirmiyahu's very life is in danger. He is actually put in a physical prison, right? He is actually physically in danger. And the idea is that God is on his side, so he is not actually killed. So what we saw with Yirmiyahu, again, the mouth that had to somehow be prepared to say the prophecy. In this case, God touches and says, my words are now in your mouth. But Yirmiyahu has really been dedicated from birth. Right? We saw that he had to interpret some symbols that he saw. This is very much kind of a Yirmiyahu thing, that there are these symbolic actions, symbolic things he has to see, and then he has to interpret. There's a lot of education, God's education of Yirmiyahu that he has throughout his prophecies in terms of how to see Jerusalem, how to see God's relationship to the nation, all these things. And we see that his mission is to tell them, is to speak these prophecies against the nations and against Jerusalem, but he's going to be under attack. Not only will they not listen to him, they are actually going to be attacking him. And now we come to Yechezkel, and I know we're close to the end of the time. I'll have to do it quickly. Now, Yechezkel, again, I'm not going to go into what's called Maseh Merkava, the Heavenly Chariot and its makeup and trust me on this one. Very, very concrete. You could draw it. As opposed to Yeshayahu, where Yeshayahu is this brief vision, you'd have to kind of guess what angels look like, guess. That here, where it describes the chariot, you're supposed to, the things that we don't understand, you feel like you're supposed to understand. Like really, you feel like there's a meaning that you are supposed to be able to like understand exactly what he's describing. As an anecdote, my mother took carpentry, and in her carpentry class was someone who was a retired member of Knesset. It was actually like his second career. He had been a doctor and then he was a member of Knesset. He was Orthodox, right? And he wanted to carve the chariot from Yechezkel. He wanted to carve it because it's described. And his wife was like, honey, maybe you shouldn't. Like, maybe don't carve that. And he didn't in the end, but he could have, like, he would have had to make a guess in a couple places, right? But it's really described very concretely. Yechezkel is always super concrete, including with his symbolic actions. We'll talk about it later in the class. You see, he's very, very, very concrete, and he concretizes the idea. What Yechezkel really is going to be is doing is he's describing the divine presence and the chariot of the divine presence, so that later he can describe it leaving Jerusalem, right? God has left the building, right? And in order to do that, he has to really describe, this is what the chariot looks like, this is exactly what it is. And then when he describes it leaving, you're like, wow, right? So here, at any rate, where is he? He is Vani b'toch hagolah on the Har Kfar. He is in Babylonia. Okay, so Yechezkel's in Babylonia. The heavens open up, and I see works of God, right? And sights of God, right? This is the 5th year of the exile of Yoyachin. The exile of Yoyachin is 597, so this is 593. Okay, and he sees, he's lifted. So he's lifted up, and he describes the chariot, the heavenly chariot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He describes it at length in detail. I am scrolling down. We are skipping this whole thing. Okay. And then, okay, and now we're going to go right to the next chapter. Here we are. Oh, look, we have to go to the very end. So he sees this whole thing, right? He sees this whole thing, and he sees what is clearly supposed to be God. He sees an image that's like the appearance of a man. From the top and from below, it's just fire, right? Glowing. And he's careful. He's like, it's kind of like the appearance of a man, but it's very clear that what he's describing is supposed to be God, right? And so what he does is so I saw, and I fell on my face, right? I bowed down, but it's more than bowing down, right? So there's the fear that one should have in the divine presence, right? Even though he's not particularly describing it, he's falling on his face. And I heard a voice speaking. And what did the voice say to him? And he said to me, man, son of man, this is what Yechezkel always gets called. He's always called Ben Adam, son of man, son of Adam, right? The son of man. Stand on your feet, and I will speak with you. A wind came and actually lifted him up on his feet. And I heard what he said to me. And he said to me, and so this is interesting, I want to point this out. So before, we always had some kind of hesitancy. With Yechezkel, there is no hesitancy, right? He sees this, and then he does fall on his face, but he's not like, who am I? And da, da, da. We're going to see a little bit of hesitancy with something specific later, but you don't have him drawing back. It seems typical of Yechezkel. Yechezkel actually, of our nice long book prophets, he seems to have in a way the easiest time in that he is consistently respected. People take him seriously. He doesn't seem to have a problem. He doesn't seem to have the same problem that, for example, Yirmiyahu does in terms of convincing people. I shouldn't say that. People don't necessarily believe him, but people take him seriously. The elders take him seriously, and he's an important guy. He's not just some guy from, I don't know, Hicksville or something. He is one of the elite who was exiled, and he's considered one of the elites. Like they come to him to talk to him. So he's very well respected. So God says, Ben Adam sholech ani otcha el bnei Yisrael el goyim hamordim asher mardu bi. So he says, I'm sending you to the children of Israel, the rebellious peoples who rebelled against me. They and their fathers are rebelled against me until this day, till this very day, right? V'abanim kshe panim v'chizkei lev ani sholech otcha alehem v'amart alehem ko amar Hashem Elokim. So he said, and these sons, they're stubborn and they're hard of heart. I'm sending you to them, and you should say, so says God. V'hema im yishma'u v'im yichdalu ki bet merihema v'yad'u ki navi haya b'tocha. And if they listen, and if they stop doing whatever they're doing because they're rebellious, or you can read it in two ways. You can say if they stop doing what they're doing, or if they listen, or if they don't, right? So you can read it either way. Because they are a rebellious house, they will know that a prophet was among them, because your prophecy is going to come true. Now we do see here that there's this also idea of being afraid. He said, don't be afraid of them, and from their words, don't be afraid. So note the difference here with Yirmiyahu. Yirmiyahu had to be like a city ready for siege. Yechezkel shouldn't be afraid of what they say. Don't be afraid of what they say. Okay? They are defiant, and you are sitting among scorpions. Don't be afraid of their words. Don't be afraid of their fate, of their faces, of their countenance, because they are a rebellious house. And you should say my words to them if they listen or if they don't, because they are rebellious. And what it sounds like is they might listen to you. They, as opposed to the previous two prophets we looked at, right? Yeshayahu and Yirmiyahu, where the idea is they're not going to listen to you, at least really not for a long time. Yechezkel, they might listen to you, right? And now we get to the mouth thing, because even though he didn't refuse, his mouth still has to have what it needs to be able to do prophecy. Again, we get this trope over and over. He says, listen to what I'm telling you. Don't be rebellious like the rebellious house. Open your mouth and eat that which I'm going to give you. What does he give him? He gives him a scroll. He's got to eat the scroll. And he spread it out in front of me. It's written on both sides. And it's written on it lamentations and like moaning and woe. Woe is me. Like he is like this expression of woe, right? So it's got things of woe written on it. And Vayomer Eli ben Adam et asher timsacho. So Ramon interprets this as that Yechezkel is kind of resisting eating the scroll. He doesn't want to eat the scroll, which is why God has to tell him over and over, no, you're going to eat it, right? And he says, yo, son of man, that which you have, eat. Eat the scroll and then go speak to the house of Israel. And I opened my mouth and he fed me the scroll. He's like, your stomach is going to eat it, and your innards, right, are going to be filled with this Megillah that I give to you. And Radak says he has to digest it and not vomit it up, right? You can't just take a bite, right? You have to really swallow it down and digest it and not throw it up, right? And I ate it, and it was sweet as honey in my mouth. Okay. And so what's interesting is it's actually a scroll filled with lamentations. He didn't want to eat it, but once he ate it, he realized how sweet it is, right, to speak the word of God. One assumes is the idea. And then, and I'm going to try to be quick. I know I'm a little bit over time here. He says to him, he goes on, there's more, this is like still his initial mission, that he should go. Ben Adam lech bo el Beit Yisrael v'dibartu b'dvarai alehem kilo in case safa v'chivdei lashon atashaloch el Beit Yisrael. He says, I'm sending you to the house of Israel, not a people of in case safa v'chivdei lashon. They are not people with like deep language and who are heavy of tongue, right? These are people, they're not speaking some strange language, right? That makes them sound weird. These are your people, right? Right? Lo amim rabim im kesef shonasher lo tishma divreihem. I'm not sending you to all the many nations. Now, by the way, Yechezkel also has prophecies to the nations, but that's a separate thing. He's like, I'm not sending you to the many nations. This is different from Yirmiyahu, whose initial mission is said, I'm sending you to the nations, right? Who have this depth, this language that you can't understand, that you can't understand what they say. If I would send them to you, they would listen to you, right? Who's not going to listen to you? The people who can understand you aren't going to listen to you. And the house of Israel is not going to want to listen to you because they don't want to listen to me, says God, right? They have hard, all the house of Israel are hard of forehead and hard of heart, right? They're all stubborn, right? So they don't want to listen to you because they don't want to listen to me, not because they don't understand what you're saying, because they don't want to listen. By making you're going to be as hard as they are. I'm going to make you hard enough to be hard against them. Okay? So he's saying, I'm going to make you hard as stone, right? Your far is going to be hard as rock, right? So you don't be afraid of them because they are a rebellious house. And again, he goes on and says, okay, you're going to go to the exiles. The exiles are all in Babylonia with Yechezkel, right? If they listen, if they don't, right? And then he has the end of his divine revelation. The wind lifts him and he hears after them, Baruch Kvod Hashem and Kol Mo, blessed is the glory of God in his play, from his place, right? And then he hears, the chariot, the wings of the animals with the chariot, he hears them, and the wind brings him up, and then he comes to from this heavenly, from where he's been raised for this heavenly revelation, he comes back to the exile, the community of exiles in Tel Aviv, which is in Babel, right? And I sat there 7 days without speaking. And then after 7 days, he gets a prophecy, which actually kind of sets out the role of the prophet. And it's not just a prophecy. We're going to talk about the role of the prophet in prophetic language in probably in the next class. So what we see here with Yechezkel, what I like with all these things, again, is how you see in their dedication things about the prophet and the prophecy as a whole. So with Yechezkel, what we see is he's pretty confident. He does not say, oh, don't make me a prophet, I'm not worthy. He doesn't say any of that, right? He is broad. He has this whole heavenly revelation. He's super concrete. He describes everything he sees to the tiny details. We skipped over it. We didn't have time, but every single thing he describes, right? He's very concrete, and he eats the scroll. Yirmiyahu gets touched on his mouth, and God says, now my words are in your mouth. Yechezkel has to eat and digest a physical scroll, right? Very Yechezkel, right? He's very concrete. He's going to have actions like that. This is not the last time he has to eat something he doesn't want to. This is Yechezkel in a nutshell. And whereas Yirmiyahu was told, you are going to be embattled. You need to be like a city. I will make sure that you're safe. Yechezkel is told, don't be afraid. Okay, I'm going to make you as stubborn as they are. As stubborn as they are, I'm going to make you more stubborn, right? They don't want to listen to you, but maybe they'll listen. So Yechezkel has a very different setup than Yirmiyahu does. In fact, he has a very different life than Yirmiyahu does in a lot of ways. So we kind of see in the dedications, on the one hand, they have these pieces in common. And again, of course, a revelation. You have to have a revelation that's necessary. You have usually this kind of thing where the prophet says, oh no, I'm not worthy for some reason. We don't see it so much with Yechezkel. We have this trope of the mouth. His mouth has to somehow be prepared to speak the words of prophecy in some way. Yeshayahu is purified by the coal. Yirmiyahu, God touches his mouth and says, my words are in your mouth, and Yechezkel has to eat a scroll, right? So those are things, and he's given both his mission and told what to expect, what is going to be the reaction, and that in itself seems to be part of the mission almost. Part of the mission is whether people are going to be listening or not. Even if they don't listen, that's still part of the mission, because that's part of what God wants. They're going to not listen, and then afterwards, they're going to be like, oh, wow, there was a prophet there, right? So let me just read. I see there's a comment here. Susan says, God's wanton predicting the Judeans will not listen to Isaiah, so they will get the punishment they deserve, is reminiscent of God foretelling that Pharaoh will not listen, so that God's glory will be displayed in punishing the Egyptians. Both raise questions about free will. Yes, and that is not the only place in a prophecy where we have God saying, yeah, it's too late, right? Yeah, they're not going to listen, or it's too late. We have Yechezkel has actually a more troubling statement. Like there are absolutely, there's several places where you have this idea that God's like, yeah, they're not going to listen, and I know they're not going to listen, and they're just going to be punished. Or even like they're being misled. We had that interesting thing, which was kind of a way of explaining false prophecy. We had that in the book of Kings when we looked at it, where we had him say, oh, God sent a deceptive spirit out to give false prophecy, right? And that's super problematic, right? But it's a way of understanding false prophecy when it comes from someone who seems to be a real prophet. So Ido says, we saw 4 prophets with dedication stories. Do any of the other prophets, such as the Transar, have dedication stories? Well, no, not really, but also they're very short. They're short. There isn't a lot of room for dedication stories. We have them describing, like Amos describes that he was selected, right, from behind his flocks and cattle, or we have the Yonah story, right, but there doesn't seem to be a dedication there really. Habakkuk turns to God, right, rather than God turning to him so much. The Transar, because they're so short, the Transar, the minor prophets, Book of the 12, they're so short that there isn't much room for dedication. And it does make you think, like, how important is the dedication part of it in prophet stories, right? Because Eliyahu also doesn't really get a dedication story. So it's not, how important is this idea of the dedication? So we have it in these longer books, but it's not a necessary thing that we need to know about a prophet. Right,
Shmuel has something, I think. Shmuel has, like, when God, it's not like this. It's not a dedication, but he hears
Shmuel,
God.
Absolutely, he gets chosen. He's sleeping in the temple, and he gets chosen. Like Shmuel gets it. Yeah, Shmuel does. But most of the prophets, we don't, like most of the other prophets, we don't see a real from what I'm just kind of running through them in my mind. And we don't really get any kind of, God choosing them. And it's interesting because it feels like that's really not the most important thing. And when you have a really long book of someone, then yeah, you want to know how he was chosen and stuff like that. But the important thing is the actual prophecy. And a lot of prophets seem to come out of nowhere, right? Like Eliyahu, there are a lot of them that just seem to, like, they're just there. And we don't know that much in terms of backstory.
Miriam?
And again, yeah, but wait, just again with Eliyahu, there may have been some version that had all the stories and had a dedication, the dedication, but we don't have it. Yeah, Danny.
I think the contrasting sequencing of chapters I find rather interesting. You have the dedication. Okay, you've got Moshe, you've got Shmuel, Yirmiyahu, Yechezkel, Hosea. They all more or less begin with the dedication, whereas you have Nevi'im like Yeshayahu and Amos, where
Amos is not, there isn't really Amos, I don't think of it as a dedication. Amos is like explaining.
Lo Navi velo ben Navi.
That's him explaining something. That's not his dedication. He's explaining to someone else in a narrative, listen, buddy, I'm the real deal and I'm not being paid and God chose me from like behind my flocks. But it's not the whole God choosing him. Like we don't get to see God choosing him. So I'm just correcting that. But yes, Yeshayahu, the whole thing that Yeshayahu comes in the 6th chapter is strange. Everyone, in traditionally, that was always like, because Yeshayahu, that it was always talked about not in terms of the dedication of Yeshayahu, but that Yeshayahu was a much more important, much more like a higher level prophet than Yechezkel. So for him, seeing a heavenly revelation was no big deal. So you can wait till chapter 6, right? Where Yechezkel has to open with it, right? That was always what we learned in school. But really, it is an interesting sequence of chapters. What is generally understood, as far as I've always read and heard, is that with Yeshayahu, the first 5 chapters are meant to be kind of a summary of his prophecy. In other words, this is a good kind of sample of this. This kind of sums up the idea of his prophecy, and then it can kind of go back and say, okay, what's his story? And now let's go through the whole thing. But it is a weird sequence. Yes, it is strange that it comes in chapter 6.
But you get something fairly similar in Amos, where first you get to the crux of the prophecy, and only later on do you get the background of how the prophecy is the prophecy.
I feel like with Amos we have to care first. And first of all, Amos, we only hear what Amos has to say about how he was chosen when he has to explain it. Okay, and he has to explain it because of the prophecies he said. In other words, he said prophecies that related to the king. The head priest in Shomron says to him, "Buddy, you are pushing it, right? You are essentially speaking treason." He writes to the king to try and get Amos in trouble. It doesn't really work. So then he tries to get Amos out. He's like, look, you're saying prophecies that are really problematic, and you should just go back to Judah where this isn't a problem. You're in Shomron. He says to him, you're in a royal city now, and you're saying things about the king. Maybe get out, right? Not maybe. You should leave, right? You wouldn't understand any of that if you hadn't already had some of his prophecies. So there's a real reason for you to not get to that point. And also, again, we have to kind of care about Amos. And also his first prophecies are great. Like we'll get to Amos. We're going to get to, because Amos has our next class, we're going to start talking about what the prophets themselves say about the nature of prophecy and the inability to not prophesy if you have a prophecy. Why do you have to say a prophecy if you know no one's going to listen, right? And those are things that Amos deals with, Yechezkel deals with. It's a theme for obvious reasons. So we're going to look at what the prophets say about that aspect of prophetic activity. And so we're going to get to Amos and his really terrific prophecies soon. Okay, so if no one has any more questions, thank you for joining me, and I will see you next week.